For this class, we'll be having a new concept, which is now state. But we have been talking about this state that makes a component to re-render. And we have various state in React. And the first hook we'll be using is a use state. So whenever we'll be talking about state or how to manage states, I'm not talking about the US states. We're talking about the state in React. And these states, we manage them using hooks. And in React, we have 5 types of hooks that we work with them. So think of a state as your component brain. So it remembers things like current form values, maybe the selected tab, items in a cart. And anytime a user interacts with your component, you typically update the state. So the 5 types of hooks we have in React, we have the use state, we have the use reducer. So these two states, they are usually used to manage a state in React. Then the second type of hook we have is the use context. So the use context uses data that is passed through a context. Then we have the then hook, which is useref. So useref uses some references from your HTML document. And finally, uh, hook number 4 is a use effect. So the purpose of the use effect is to handle anything that is happening outside React component. Think of it like when you want to communicate with now the server, the bucket. So the use effects will help you to do that because that action of communicating to a server, it's not something that is happening on a React component. It's an side effect that is happening where? In the React component. And finally, we have the fifth types of hook, which we call performance hook. We have the use memo and use callback. So they are used to improve the performance of your application or the React application by maybe caching the data that you're frequently using and to avoid so much of recomputing that data rather than using that data. So we will be talking about these 5 types of hook in React. And the most basic one that we'll be starting with one is this, the managing state, using the use state and use reducer. Then we move further. Then in the next class, we talk about the use effects and use ref. Then later, we talk about the use context. And finally, we use the performance hooks. So if you hear me talking about state hook, reducer hook, use ref hook, use effect hook. So these are types of hooks that we use in React. So they are just inbuilt hooks that help us manage the state, reference some HTML document element, maybe to perform some external or to manage external effects that are happening in external or outside the React component. Then if you want to talk about things like the performance, how you want your application maybe to improve that performance, that is done through these hooks we call use memo and use callback. Then a component memory. So we said a state is like a component memory, which is like a brain of your React component. So it remembers something or it remembers things like the form values, the selected tabs, the items in a cart. So anytime the user interacts now with this component, you typically update those states. So the state is just a component what? Memory. So they need these components often need to change what is in the screen as a result of now the things we talked about, the handling events. So we might be having something like typing into the form should update the input field, maybe clicking the next in an image carousel. So you should change the image which is being displayed. Then if you are buying something in an e-commerce system, so if you click buy, so you are changing the state from maybe adding that item and putting it in a shopping cart. So the components needs to remember things. That is whatever is happening. So the current input value, the current image, the shopping cart, and the rest, etc. So in React, this kind of components specific memory is what we call the state. So why state and not a normal variable that you can use? So the simple answer is the local variable does not persist between renders. So when React renders this component a second time, it renders it from the scratch. So it will just, it doesn't consider any changes that were happened in what? In that local variables. And the other thing is changes to the local variable, so won't trigger any re-render, but a state will cause a re-render of a component when working with the React. And so React does not realize it needs to re-render the component again with the new data. And the first hook we want to learn about is the useState hook. So before we do that, we want to explain further about a state. So a state is like a snapshot of your current component, like the brain at which the component is being rendered at that time. So think of it like how a camera operates. So anytime you are taking a picture, that's a snapshot. So that's the current snapshot of that variable. So a state is not just that simple variable that we use in JavaScript or TypeScript, but this state adds something we call special functions that helps to set and update those what state. So with the help of the functions like now the useState, which is now our first hook, and the useReducer, you can update that state and cause a re-render in the component using these theta functions. And the very first hook we'll be talking about is a useState. So a useState hook, it's a built-in React hook. It lets you create a state variable and a function to update it. So when you call the update function, the component refreshes with the new state. So how do you handle, or how do you the syntax of a useState hook? So it's very much simple. You call the function useState and it returns an array of two things. So those two things is now the state, which is the variable, and now the setter function. So that setter function helps you to update the state or the variable that we have. So this setter function, like the set like function, you often see it's a camel case of the variable. So if you are having like a maybe count useState, you find the function name will be something like the camel case of state count. If you're having another useState, so you use this or you return the two variable from our useState. We say that this is an inbuilt function in React. And how do you add a state in your application? So it's very simple. You import. We say it's an inbuilt library or function. So you import it from React. Then you use it the same we are doing here. So you store the two variables that the useState gives you. Then whatever you are passing in this function is the initial value or the starting value of your state. So if your state wants to start at 0, you initialize it with 0. If your state wants to initialize it with an empty string, so initialize it with just quotation mark. That means it's a boolean, a string. If you want to initialize it with an object, so you initialize it with an empty object. If you want to initialize it with an array, so you initialize it with square what? Bracket. That is how you use this. So you import this the useState from there, and how do you operate? So you said it's like a camera. So you want to store the current snapshot of your whatever the camera has captured. So the same case, the React component want a state where it can store the current state. So you have the button. So the button is of course a component in React. So that component has on click what? Has on click what? What is this? Ambrose, what is this on click? We can't hear you. Yeah, so it's an event listener of type you're on click on a button. So whatever you are doing, we are passing a function. So this function is this one. So the function is just an arrow function that calls another function. So the function is whatever we have here. So this should be, instead of this set likes, it should be this set clicks. So can think that was an error that was made, or you can update this to be this. So set click. Then you display those state there. So this button displays the value, which is the current state. And initially when the component renders, the initial value is 0. So the button will be showing 0 what? Likes. Then once I click that button once, I'm calling this function. And this function, whatever it's doing, I'm just calling now the setup function of this useState hook. This setup function, I'm passing what? The likes, which is our current state, and adding it with 1. So if it will be 0, then to add by 1, by 1, by 1, by 1. So a quick recap, the basic syntax of this. So you call the useState by importing that from React. It's a named export. So you need to have the curly braces there. Then you use that. Then you need to make sure your state starts somewhere. So the initial value should be passed on that useState. Then the useState returns two values, which is now the state and the setter function, which is now the function that updates this what? The state. Then the next thing now we want to do. So the importance of these use states, it's good when working with it because it is a controlled what use state. So you can control whatever you are working on, especially when working in a form. You want each form inputs like the first name to be controlled by these use states. So you define the maybe this to be the first name state, then the set value to be now the set function name. This is the function that will be updating this. So in this input, we initialize it with empty value. So the input of the first name, we want it to be empty. But the moment we start typing, we want to call this set fname function to update the value first name with whatever you are typing here. So it is perfect for maybe for when I'm working with a form, I will be seeing that. So an example of that is this one. So we have an input. So the input has an attribute value and on change. So the value is now the current state, this one. So the current state is just an empty string if you indicate it with this quotation mark. Then on change, it is an listener on this input. So the on change, we are passing the event that is happening on this what? On change input field. Then once we pass that event in our callback function, so we call now the set value, this function that update this value. Then we update it with what? The event that is happening, but we want to target the actual value of this input, we are typing that input. Then we update this value with what? Whatever you are typing in this on change input. So that is whatever is happening there. Same case with this. So you assign the value, what is in this state, which is the initial empty string. Then you use the onChange listener. Then you pass the event. Then you call the set value function, which is the setter that updates our state. This is not a normal variable. That is what we said. So this value can be updated with this function. So we update with the target dot value of this what? Of this input. So that is it. And these are just examples of what we will be working with it. So let's state, so the procedure, so the user types something in the input. So that's input calls the set value function. So it calls this function. So this called function, it updates the state. So the once you call this value here or the function, it updates this state. So this state now, the value is one, the whatever you are typing. Then that value, we are displaying it with this value here. So we can be able to display that value somewhere, whatever you are typing in this input. Then the input reads what? From the state. So this value is being read from whatever we have. So you'll be having like a real-time change whenever you are typing in this form. So we are typing, we are listening to the change, then calling that function, we are giving it the value of whatever you are typing, calling that function, updating it, and also updating our state, and that state is being displayed in that value of that input directly. So let's try and see how we can work along with this. I used state hook, and it is very much simple to understand. And what I will do in my, of course, this week, I will create a new folder here, or I can just create a React project here. So pnpm create byte. So the project name can be use maybe state hook. Then it's the React, then TypeScript. Now then install the dependencies. So let's wait for the scaffolding of a React project. So it's running on port 5174. So I might be having another instance of React running. Let me just turn it off. Yeah, this one is running. And close that. So let me open this. So where is that project? So it's cd useState. Then open with VS Code. So if I run this project now, I'll get the whatever initial it is in this app.tsx. So I just want to remove everything we have here, and so that we can have our own code. So remove this. By the way, if you bootstrap this React component or React project for the first time, the hook that is being used is now the one we want to use, the useState, this one. Whatever is doing, the same we are doing here. We are calling that set function. So that set function is updating our state, which is count. We are adding 1 to that what? Count. Then we display that count here. So that is whatever is happening. But I want we do it from scratch. You see how it's being set up. So we have our app there now. It doesn't have anything. And we want to learn about the state hook. So we say the state hook is an inbuilt function in React that is used to manage a state in a component. And how do you manage or how do you use the useState? So the useState, you import it from React. So you import a named export, which is the useState. So they used it from React, this one, the first intelligence command that is being displaying there. So it's being imported from React. Where is React? In our package.json, we have installed React and the React DOM. So that is where the useState is coming from. Then once we import that, so we need to use that now useState. So we say this useState, it's a function that returns what? Two values, the state and a setup function that is being used what? So this one, it returns a stateful value and a function to update it. That is whatever is happening. So how can I use it? So first of all, I need to destructure that. So inside my function here, I want to return the two values the useState is returning. So it's an array, so not an object now. And maybe I can give it any name. So I want to give it a name like account. So that is our state, the stateful value. Then the function to update that state, which is count. And in most cases, you'll be seeing it is just the same name, but now with a prefix state. So it's just an naming convention that you usually find most of people use. So it would be just a camel case of what? The count. Then this we are getting from where? The useState what? The useState what? Hook. It's a function. Then we said the useState expect the initial value, like your start point of that state. So it's a count. So maybe you want to count from 1. So I can, or 0. So I can initialize it with 0. If I want to initialize it with another different value, like that, then let's initialize it with 0. Then remember it's a function. And if you check this, the return type of this function, it's a number. So the TypeScript is smart enough to know like, yes, we have passed a 0, which is a number. If we pass an empty string, the compiler will tell you, yes, I know that's a string, but we may need to make sure we are explicitly typing anything we are writing in our code because we are using TypeScript. So how do you type this function? You just use these symbols there. And once you use that, if now it's a string, you pass it as a string there. So the return type of this now will be a string. If it's a number, which is 0, the initial value, so we want to type it with what? A number. If it's a Boolean, so like a true, here should be what? Boolean. Something like that. So that is how you type a hook in React. But I want it to be a number for this time. So number. Then, so how do we use this now? The two values, the state and the function. So in my return, so that is where I want to return my JSX. So I want to have a div. So this div maybe has some styles. So inside this div, I want to have some styles. So these styles, we said we can have a background color of this, background of height, and the rest. So let me just copy those CSS properties as quick as possible. So, but this background color, we are passing it as a direct what? Um, value. But for this case, let me just pass it just a normal. You see how we can update it dynamically. So we have now this div that has this. So it might be having an issue. So maybe red. Why is this having an issue? Oh, it should be in single quotes. So this div, we want to do something now. So this div has no corresponding closing tag. Or this one should have that closing tag there. So inside this div, I want also to have another div inside that the first div we are having. So I want to have another div. Is it these are just HTML element that helps you divide your HTML document with greater styling, maybe properties. So maybe this div, I want to have something with also some styling. So this styling, we want also to have like a background color of this, padding and border radius. So it's just a div that is nested in another div. That is where we want to work. So on this div, I want to have maybe an H3 of whatever we want to learn. So we want to learn about what is useState. So it's just an ender in our component. What is useState hook. And we want to have maybe an ordered list to display the list, like what is useState. It's the data that can change over the time. Then the useState is just a React hook to manage what? State. Then the returns what? The current value and the setter function, whatever you are doing. So it returns a value and the setter function. Then it causes a re-render whenever we have a change in this count change with the use of what? This setter count. So that is what we have in this div. So let me just collapse that. So inside this, let me open this on the browser and see what is happening. Yeah, so that is whatever we are having. So our background, then what is useState, the 3 or the 4 points that we need to keep in mind what is happening with this hook. Let me put it side by side. So once that is done, so we want now to use this counter hook in our app. So just below here, I want to use this counter example. So in this, I want to have also a div. So this div, I'm just adding them for styling purposes. So this style div has a style of a background of maybe a trim border radius of 20 pixels and margin bottom of 20. So this is the div that I have this. So it has this background, appending the border radius, the margin and box shadow. So inside this div, I want to have an H3 element. And this H3 element, maybe it's an example one of how we can use this symbol counter. So how can we use this simple counter? The first thing is to display what? The current state we are now. So we are at state what? 0. So how can I display that? So I can use a p tag, then just add a static value there like current count is, then full colon. Then once I have that, I can call the curly braces, which is our JS6 syntax, to pass the dynamic value, which is now this count. So that is what I want to pass there, the count. So once I pass that, that value should be displaying here. So we can't see because of the color. So let's change the color of that div, the color to be something like of dark, so 333, then comma. So with that, we have now our div that is displaying what? The current what? State, this state we are having here. So whatever you are displaying here. So if you want our state to start at 100, so we have to add it as 100. So our start value of our state is what? 100. If you want to make it a string, so this should be what? A string. Then the initial string should be what? Maybe an empty string. So if you remove that, you should not be seeing anything. But essentially, we have like an empty string in that value there. But you want to work with numbers first. So the current state is this, but we can so our current state is this. Then we can now have another div to update this state, maybe by adding one or subtracting one from this number. Because it's a number, we can do some math what operation. So just below that, I want to have another div. So this div, I want to have like maybe 2 or 3 divs. So let me just have this styling for this div, so that you can be able to see the difference. So inside this div, I want to have a button. So button, and this button, I want to have 3 buttons. First one is for incrementing, like I want to increment this value by 1 using our setter count function. Then I want to have another button, maybe for decrementing, like reducing it by 1. And maybe we can have another button to reset that state. Like if you're at 100, I want to reset it back to the initial value, which is 0. Then do we need another button maybe to double the value? So because it's a mathematics. So we'll have like maybe these 4 buttons for doing that. So the styles, maybe let me have these styles as quick as possible. So we have style for that button. We need also a style for this button also. Then same case with this and same case for this button. They're just styles to make our button be more visible. So the next thing now is to add text on this button. So this may be the first button is for adding or updating our value with 1. So we can have like add 1, something like that. And the other one is to be what? Subtract what? With 1, our state. Then this one to be maybe reset. And this one to be maybe to double the state value. So we have the 3 buttons. This one is for adding, this one is for subtracting, this one is for resetting, and this one is for what? So we can have some emojis there to have some button to nice styled buttons there. Then maybe for reset, we can use the reset emoji, and maybe to double, we can say it's a multiplication. So we have the three buttons there. The one is this, adding, subtracting, and resetting and doubling. So in the first button, we want, anytime we click this button, we want to increase our state with what? With the one by one by one by one. So in the button, we need which listener? Which listener do we need in the button? Or which listener event we listen in a button? On click. So if we listen to that click event, so we want to pass now a dynamic what? A value in this JSX curly braces. So what we want to pass, we want to call now our function, this one, set count function that we want to update our state with. So if I call now that set count function, but we don't want to call it directly. We want to pass it as a callback function. So how can we do that? So before calling this, we can pass it as a callback function this way. Then we call what? The set count function. Then what are we doing? So in this case, set count function, we want to pass what? The value, because this set count is a React useState function that expects a what? A number. So we will pass now our value or the current state that we are now, which is 0. So we will pass it there, count. Then what we want to do with this count, we want to add what? 1. So we are listening to an on-click event. Then we are calling a callback function that we are passing the set count function. This one, set count function, and we want to update our state. So the current state, we are this one, which is at 0, but now we want to add it with 1. So whenever we click this button now, we will be adding our state with what? By 1. So if I click, I'm getting 1. If I click, I'm getting 2. So the current state of our component now, which is now the snapshot that we talked about, is 2. But if I click that, I will get that state, which is 2 and 1, 3. So 3 and 1, the same case. So that is what is happening in this button. So the rest is now the duplicate and doing the vice versa. If I'm adding, if I want to subtract, is what? So I'll just call the same function, which is on click. Then instead of adding, I'll do what? Subtraction. So if I now click this, I'm doing what? Subtracting that state. Then if it's resetting, so how can we reset? Who can help us with how we can reset this value? So what should we pass here so that we can reset our function or our state? So what should we pass?
We
won't
pass
just
it to be
empty, but the function is having an issue, like it expects an argument.
We can add 2 double quotes.
But you are dealing with a number. Double quotes is for string. Someone to help us with this. We want to reset our count, which is set. Whenever we click this reset button, we want to reset to whatever we have here back to the initial value, which is this. What should we do? No one has an idea?
What if we try count minus count?
Count?
Minus count.
Minus count. Minus count this way. Yeah.
count itself.
So count minus
Count.
count. Are you sure it will work? Okay, let's try and see. So if we reset count, is it working? If I add reset, it's doing what? But this is not the best way of resetting your value. So you just need to pass 0. They will pass that as a 0 there. Anytime you're adding, that value will be reset to 0. That way. You can use the Evans approach or mine, and it will work the same. So what about doubling? We want to double. So what should we do with our state? We want anytime we click this double state, we want to take the state and double that value, and double that value. So it is just count multiplying by what? 2. So with that now, if I am maybe 5, if I double it, that is 10. So 10 times 2, 20, 20 times 2, 40, and the rest. If I add that, if I subtract that, if I reset, I'm getting that. So that is how you work with the useState. And it is, you can use it as many times as you want. So I can import this useState again here. So I can have another state, like for changing the mood. So how can I change the mood? So it is the same syntax. So const store the two return values, which is maybe now the mood, and set what? Mood. Where are we getting them? From our useState. So this useState, I want to type it, the mood is of type string. So let me type it with now a string. Then the empty or the initial string, I want to use, I'm a fan of using emojis when doing my coding. So I'll just, maybe the initial mood we have is this emoji there. So that is the initial mood we are having. Then whenever now we want to call this set mode, we want to do what? To update our mood with a new what? Emoji. So what do we, how can we implement that? So just below our the button. So let me minimize this a little bit. So we are done with this, and maybe let me collapse this div. Where is that div starting from? This one. So this is the one we are doing. So the next thing I want us to do now is another H3, which is something like the mood changer. So the mood changer, we want to do something. But first of all, before changing that mode, we want to display the current mode that we are having. So how can we do that? So the current mode, it's this, then we display what? With the JSX syntax, the mode we are having. Let me also, oh, we can't minimize this. Yes, we can do it that way. Yeah, so the current mode, we want to display this current mode, which is this what? Emoji there. So that is what I want to display there. So our mode. So with that now, we have our mode, which is this. But we can also style it a little bit. We can have it in a special HTML tag, which is span. So this span, we can have maybe a style of maybe the margin. So to be this, then inside now the span, we want to call our mode there. So we display it as a big mode emoji there. So the next thing we want to do now is a way we can change that mode. So below our p tag where we displaying the mode, we want to have another button. So this button It is where we have our on click what? Event. So on click. So this on click, we'll have this maybe a function to update that. So we do not have that function. So we need to call that function. So how can we have that function? So we don't want to use this set mode function, but we want another function that will call this function so that we can be able to update what. So in here, just below here, I want to have an arrow function. So const change mode. So this change mode function, let me have it as an arrow function. So this is the function that I want to call, that we will be calling this set mode. So this change mode, that is what I want to pass here. So the change mode function. So this change mode function, we want it to be doing what? Changing our mode. And how can we do that? So we can do it in a different way. So inside my button, I need some text. What can we have in this text? Maybe change my what? Mode, something like that. Change my mode. So the next thing is now to implement this function, which we have here. So in this function, we want to do something. We want to have an array of mode that we can be randomly choosing when we'll be setting our what? Our mode. So how can we do that? So we can have an array of modes, which is an array of those emojis we have there. So we can have these modes here. So we can have that the first mode, maybe the second mode, the third, the fourth, and the rest. Then we have this, we use the math function or the math class that we have in Node. So to change that mode or to pick a random mode here. So how can we do that? So we want to call maybe to store that in a variable. So const a random mode. What we want to do? So we want to call the modes that we have. This one, not this one. This is our state, but this is our an array. We want to call our array. Then we want to access the element using the index. So what do we want to do? We want to use the math class that is inbuilt in a Node or the React or JavaScript or TypeScript library. So this math, we have this for function. So the for function just give us some random number that we can use. So it just passes you a number, and that number we want to pass another math function, but we pick it randomly. So we just want to call a random number. So that random function, we want to multiply with our length of our array. So we don't want to generate a number that is beyond our what? The index we have. So we want to multiply it with our modes dot what? Length. So we want to make sure we are grounding the number or the random that number we are generating. So this mode is just returning this number. This one. So in this number, it's now we are using it as an index to access each element in this what? So this random value, it will return a what? A number. So we should type it with a number there. So once it returns that number, we'll be using it as our index to access what? The mode we have where? In this array of ours. Then the next thing is now to call our setter function, which is set mode. So we call the set mode. Then what we need to pass? The random mode that we have selected, but we are just passing the index of emoji that we want to do what? To display. So we call that random mode. mode we are passing. So anytime now we call this function, the change mode. So it is just initializes our mode, then the random mode. So we want to pick random. We don't want to have that sequential or a pattern will be picking. So we want to be just picking a different mode from this with the help of this math.throw function, then which returns a number. So whatever this is doing, it's maybe returning a number like index 0, maybe index 1, maybe index 3. So that index, so you'll be accessing this mode. Index 3 is which one? I think this one, eh? Because it's 0, 1, 2, 3. If it's 4, the same. But we want to do that randomly. We don't want to pass it as a static value. So whatever will be happening now, the button on click, it calls this function, which now does this, then also calling the set function or the set mode function that updates our what? Our state. So let's try and see whether our button should work. So if I click for the first time, I'm getting a change in what? So randomly it just picks this index. If I click again, I'm getting a different random what? Number or the index mode. So if I click again, another mode. I think it's this one. Click again, I'm getting another mode, which is this one. Another one, another one, another one. So that is how you use the useState. So we can maybe have the last example of how you can use the useState hook, and maybe something like what? Maybe hide and show some magic box. So I want to have something like a state for show stroke hide a magic box. So how can we implement that? So remember, we need first of all to return the two things. So I can have the show magic box, then comma, then the set function to do this. So the magic box, Control C, Control V, but this should be in camel case. Show magic box, which is useState. Then the initial value should be now, we want to use the Boolean. So we can use now to be false. Then the data type of this is Boolean. That's it. So how can we use this? So in our application, so let's now cross this. So where is this div coming from? So from there, then below there we can have the next, which is the short. I then short the magic box. So it's just a div component that we can design using our normal styling properties. So in our div, we want to pass the styles. So the styles I want to pass is these styles we have here. So the styles is the background, there is this and this. So this is whatever we are having this div here. Then we need to have a button. So this button, I want to have it here. So the button, then this button should maybe have that message of short magic box, that one. So we'll have that magic box. So this magic box, it's just a div, which is just below here, of which now you want to use the ternary operators that we talked about yesterday, the question mark, that is an if statement. Like if this is this, do this, with this, do this. So how can we do that? First of all, let's have some styling to this button of ours. So this button should be have those styling like that. So it's just this button we have here. And of course, it's a button. We need an on-click event listener. So this on-click event listener, we want to pass a callback function. Then we pass what? Our setup function, this one, set what? Show magic box. So let me copy that. Then that is what we want to pass in this. So show magic box. Then we want to pass now a value in this set what? Function. But we want to say to update what? So this function only update what? This state. So that is what we need to pass in this what? Function, which is this. But we want to start the reverse way. So we want to negate this. If it's true, we want to start it with false. So that is whatever is happening there. Then the next thing now, in the button, the message we are showing here, which is show box, we want to dynamically show that text. So if you are showing that box, we want to show the reverse of that, which is hide what? That box. If you are hiding that box, you want to show the message what? Show what? The box. How can we do that? So we can remove this show box and you open our JSX syntax. Then we use now the ternary operator. So we call that variable show magic box. Then we use the question mark, which is like an if statement. So if we have a show magic box, you want to show the opposite of that, which is what? Hide what? So we are showing the magic box. So the button should be showing the opposite of that, which is hide what? Box. If not that the case, we want to show what? The box. So that is what is happening here. We are checking if we are showing that box. So the button should be showing what? Hide box. If the button is showing show box, we want to show what? To hide what? The magic box. So that is what is happening. Then after that, after the button, that is where we want now to design our what? Our maybe the magic box. So it's just a div that has some what? So this div, let me just have it here. So this is the div that we want to show, but it has some what? So this should be not be coming from there. So this is the div that we want to be showing. There is one that has this background linear gradient of this. Then it has some what? Those emojis there. Then, so you want now, anytime we click this button, we want to do this. So if we are showing that button, we want to show the opposite of that. But we want to display this when it's there. So we use the other ternary operator, the two ampersand. So how can we use that? So just below our button here, we want to open another JSX what? Syntax. So we call our show what? Box, and now have our ampersand syntax or symbols that will show the box if the two conditions meet. So if you have a show a box which is true, we want to show now this box. So how can we do this? So this box, we should cut it from there and place it here. So we want to place that box there. So whatever is happening, this display box, it's only being showed if this show magic box is true. But initially, that value is what? False. That is why this box, the button, we only having that button, and we are doing what? Telling the button, like, or telling the user, show what? The magic box. So if I click that, I'm getting what? The box. If I hide that box, I'm hiding. Show box, hide box. Show box, hide box. So whatever is happening, we have this show magic, which is our variable, is a boolean, which is now it's only showing this. This is like now the if statement without the else part. That is what is happening. But this is the if statement with else part. So this is only being showed on the if statement, but this, it has the else part. So if show box is true, we want to show a message like what? Hide what? That box. If show box is false, we want to do what? To show our box. That is what we dynamically want to render on this what? Button. Again, we said React is an HTML with what? Superpowers. Whatever we did yesterday. So with just less code, we can be able to do this efficiently. So that is how you work along with useState. And I want now the joke app we did in the morning. We can use useState to do that. So that is what I want us we do quickly before the 20 minutes that are remaining. So how should we do it? So let's maybe remove everything from here, but I will push this code separate. The concept and the joke hub using the useState. So I'll just remove whatever we have in this function. Then in the return, I want also to remove everything. Then of course, we'll be using the useState, so I don't need to remove it from our app. So how do we want to do it? So in our app, I want to have the folder data. So I want to have a folder data, then and the data, the jokes data we had. So I'll create a new file here for joke what? Data .json. Then paste that jokes there. Once we have that, so in our app, we need to make sure we can import. We have imported that data. So import jokes data. From where? We want to get it from the data, this one, folder, then slash that jokes data, this one. Then in our app function, so in most cases you will find the hooks are just below the function name. Then whatever you want to render, it's in the return function. So just inside our function, that is why we want to define the useState for jokes. So we want to initialize a state with the jokes we are